Hi there, this is Stories for Sleep, and I'm Thumani's here to spend a quiet evening with you. A space where nothing needs to get done, where you can let the day go gently. Right now, just lie down as comfortably as you can. Let your hands rest beside you or gently over your belly. No need to adjust anything, just be. Take a slow breath in, hold it softly, then exhale easy and quiet. One more time. Inhale deeply. Feel the air cooling your chest and exhale like you're letting the day slip away. Now bring your attention to your forehead. If you're holding tension, let it go. Let your brow soften. Move down to your shoulders. Feel them sinking into the mattress. Relax your arms, hands, and fingertips. Let them feel light, like they're floating in warm water. Notice your chest and belly gently rising and falling, like a quiet boat rocking on still water. And now, know that there's nothing more you have to do. No one needs you to respond. No one is waiting. This moment is just for you and for a story told softly to help you rest. Whenever you're ready, we'll begin. A master answered the biggest question in life by raising one finger. Hey guys, tonight we are stepping into a strange little corner of Zen where a single finger, raised in silence under the moonlight, could contain an entire lifetime of wisdom. Imagine this: you're walking through a quiet temple courtyard, the kind where even the shadows seem to be meditating. The air is cool, your breath feels slow, and somewhere in the distance a night bird calls. Then out of nowhere a monk asks his master what is Zen. And instead of giving a long lecture or chanting a sutra, the old man simply raises one finger. No words, no explanations, just one finger. You'd probably think, that's it. I walked all the way here for this. And yet, they say that moment changed everything for the young monk who saw it. Maybe it's a trick. Maybe it's nonsense. Or maybe you're about to find out why your brain might melt in the best possible way. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background. Hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The temple path curves like a ribbon of worn stone, each step cushioned by moss. The master is waiting ahead, sitting cross-legged on the wooden veranda. His robe is the color of faded tea leaves, his hands resting loosely in his lap. You can tell from the way his eyes half close that he's not in a rush for anything. Probably hasn't been for decades. A young monk, barefoot hair freshly shaved, approaches with a furrowed brow. He's been struggling with his practice, chasing some elusive understanding. His days are filled with sutras, meditation, and chores, but still something gnaws at him. He bows low and asks, "Master, what is Zen?" The old man looks at him for a long time. A very long time. The kind of silence that makes you suddenly aware of your own breathing. Then, without shifting his gaze, he slowly raises his right hand, extends a single finger, and holds it there. No explanation, no mantra. Just one finger against the backdrop of the night. The young monk stares, unsure if this is a joke. He waits for the rest of the answer. Nothing comes. Only the sound of a bamboo fountain tipping and refilling somewhere in the garden. Finally, the master lowers his hand as if nothing unusual just happened. The boy bows again, more confused than when he arrived, and walks away. Yet, deep down, something feels different. You might think this is some kind of spiritual prank, like a Zen version of gotcha. But here's the thing in Zen. Sometimes the simplest gesture can be the loudest teaching. The boy doesn't realize it yet, but that single finger will follow him in his thoughts, his dreams, and his practice for years. And yes, you might find that after tonight, one finger will start showing up in your thoughts, too, at the strangest moments. The moon climbs higher. The courtyard grows colder. And somewhere in the stillness, the seed of a lesson is planted. The next day, that seed will begin to grow in the most unexpected way. The boy woke before the first bell, long before the rest of the monks stirred in their rooms. The temple at dawn was another world-cool mist, clung to the eaves. The smell of damp wood filled the air, and the faint coo of doves echoed from somewhere beyond the walls. He couldn't stop thinking about that one finger. It had been such a small thing, a tiny gesture, but the memory was sharp like moonlights on still water. He replayed the moment again and again, as if a hidden meaning might suddenly appear if he stared at it long enough. At breakfast, he sat across from an older novice who seemed to notice the distant look in his eyes. "You look like someone stole your rice bowl," the novice whispered, smirking. The boy hesitated, then said, "The master, last night, I asked him what Zen is, and he just raised one finger." The novice's smirk faded. "Oh." He leaned in, lowering his voice even further. "You should probably remember that." The boy laughed under his breath. "Remember what, a finger?" But the older novice only gave him a look, half warning, half amusement, before returning to his rice. Days turned into weeks and something strange happened. Whenever the boy meditated, the image of that finger appeared in his mind. Whenever he walked the garden paths, the gesture seemed to hover in the corner of his vision. He began to imitate it in secret, just to feel if anything changed. One afternoon, while sweeping the courtyard, a group of younger boys crowded around him. One of them asked, "Hey, what's Zen?" The boy paused, leaning on his broom. Then, without thinking, he raised one finger. The younger boys laughed, then tried it themselves. By the end of the day, half the novices were wandering around the temple, raising their fingers at each other like it was some kind of private joke. It spread quickly. In the kitchen, the cooks raised a finger when asked about the soup. In the garden, the old caretaker raised a finger when a monk asked if it was going to rain. Soon the gesture became a kind of code, a silent answer to any question, serious or silly. And yet, no one seemed to know what it actually meant. Late one evening, the boy caught his own reflection in the water basin outside his quarters. He was standing with one finger raised, smiling without realizing it. That's when he felt it, the tiniest flicker of something warm and quiet inside, as if the gesture itself carried a secret that words would only ruin. He didn't know it yet, but this little act of imitation was the start of a much larger story. Some teachings grow like slow vines, twisting and reaching over years. Others, well, they arrive all at once like a bird swooping in from nowhere. The next time he saw the master, both of those ways of learning would collide. It was on a quiet afternoon, the kind where the sunlight turns golden and the air smells faintly of pine resin, that the boy found himself summoned to the master's quarters. The room was simple bare wood floors, a low table, a single scroll painting of a mountain, barely visible through a haze of ink. The master sat by the open shoji door, letting the breeze stir his sleeve. "I hear you've been raising your finger," the master said without looking up. The boy froze. His first instinct was to apologize, but something about the master's tone stopped him. It wasn't angry, more like amused, with a thread of curiosity woven through. "Yes, master," he admitted quietly. "I thought it might help me understand." The master finally looked at him. His eyes were neither stern nor soft. They were simply there like two calm lakes. "And did you?" The boy hesitated. "I don't know." The master leaned forward slightly. "Then what do you think everyone else has been learning from your finger?" The boy opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. He realized he had no idea. For a long time, the two sat in silence, listening to the creak of the old beams and the distant murmur of the wind through the bamboo. Finally, the master said, "Symbols are dangerous when they are empty. They can pass from hand to hand, but without meaning, they become toys." The boy's cheeks grew warm. "So, I've been playing, perhaps. Or perhaps the finger has been playing with you." The master smiled faintly, then stood. "Come." They walked through the temple grounds to the edge of the village. The late sun dipped low, painting the rice paddies in bronze. Children chased each other along the narrow paths, laughing. An old woman was selling steamed buns from a small stall. The master stopped beside her and bought 2 buns, handing one to the boy. "Taste," he said. The boy bit into it, soft, sweet, still warm from the steam. Now the master said, "Show me the taste of the bun without using your mouth." The boy blinked. "How could I?" He stopped mid-sentence, his mind suddenly catching on the impossibility of it. The master just looked at him with the same calm gaze, and the boy remembered the single finger hanging in the air like a question mark. And for the first time, something in him softened. Maybe the finger wasn't the answer. Maybe it was the bun. Maybe it was neither. Maybe it was everything. That night, as the crickets began their chorus, the boy lay in bed wondering how many other things he'd been trying to explain when they could only be experienced. The village would soon tell its own version of the finger story and twist it in ways neither he nor the master could predict. Word travels strangely in small places. By the time summer had deepened and the cicadas screamed from the treetops, the boy's story had spread beyond the temple walls. In the tea house near the market, merchants were telling it over steaming cups, adding little flourishes of their own. One man claimed the master's finger was a secret sign that could bring good fortune if you copied it at sunrise. Another swore it was a blessing against illness, but only if done with your left hand. By the third retelling, someone had added that the boy had once raised 2 fingers, and that was twice as powerful. The boy heard these versions while running errands in the village. At first, he tried to correct them, but the more he explained, the less anyone listened. It was as if the truth was too simple to be interesting. People preferred their own colorful versions. Back at the temple, the master seemed entirely unbothered. He continued tending the garden, adjusting the stones in the moss bed, as if arranging them just so would make the rain fall sooner. One afternoon, a traveling monk came by dusty from the road. He had heard of the mystical finger and wanted to see it for himself. The boy led him to the master and stepped back. The traveling monk bowed and asked, "Reverend, what is Zen?" The master looked at him, then raised one finger. The traveling monk nodded solemnly as if some hidden truth had just been confirmed. He bowed again, thanked the master and left without another word. The boy followed him to the gate. "What did you understand from that?" he asked. The traveler smiled. "If I tell you, it will no longer be Zen." And with that, he vanished down the dusty road. That night, the boy sat outside his room, watching the moon rise over the tiled roofs. He thought about the story's journey, how it had been passed from one tongue to another, shaped and reshaped until even he didn't recognize it. He remembered the master's words. Symbols are dangerous when they are empty. But maybe he wondered sometimes, they can still point people towards something, even if the pointing is crooked. In the days ahead, a different kind of teaching would come to him, not through a gesture but through a single sentence so ordinary it might have been overlooked. And yet, that sentence would open a door he didn't know was there. The morning was damp, the kind where the mist hangs so low it seems to rest on your shoulders. The boy was helping in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for the midday meal. His hands worked automatically, but his mind wandered, circling the same thoughts, fingers, rumors, the way people twisted the story into something it wasn't. That's when the master walked in. He didn't announce himself. He never did. He simply took a seat on the low bench near the doorway and watched for a while. The boy felt his gaze but kept chopping, waiting for a question. Instead, the master spoke one sentence. Zen is tasting the soup before asking, "What's in it?" The boy froze mid-slice. He turned knife in hand, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "Master, what?" The old man smiled faintly. "You're always asking what things mean. But some things are meant to be tasted, not explained. It was so simple, almost silly. And yet, the boy felt something loosen inside his chest. He thought of the steamed bun in the village of the finger, in the moonlight, of the laughter in the tea house. The master stood brushed invisible dust from his robe and left without another word. For the rest of the morning, the boy moved differently. He tasted the steam rising from the soup pot without leaning too close. He felt the weight of the knife in his hand, the smooth coolness of the cutting board. He noticed the sound of the water boiling, not just heard it, but felt it in the floorboards under his feet. When the meal was served, a group of novices sat together in the hall. One of them, curious about the soup, asked, "What's in it today?" The boy smiled. "Taste it." They laughed, thinking he was being evasive. But as they took their first spoonfuls, a quiet fell over the table, not from revelation, but from the simple act of paying attention. Later, walking through the temple garden, the boy realized the sentence the master had given him wasn't meant to replace the finger. It was something else entirely. A bridge between the gesture and the taste, between pointing and experiencing. It wasn't the last time the master would speak in riddles, but it was the first time the boy understood that some riddles aren't meant to be solved, they're meant to be lived. The next lesson wouldn't come in words at all, but in the clearing of a sky that had been grey for days. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight. Not the fierce, rattling kind, just a steady, endless drizzle that blurred the edges of everything. The courtyard stones were slick. The moss deepened to a richer green, and the air smelled faintly of wet earth and cedar. The boy sat under the eaves watching droplets form on the tips of the roof tiles before falling into the puddles below. His chores were done for the morning, and with nothing else to do, his mind wandered toward that familiar itch. When will I finally understand? As if sensing the thought, the master appeared carrying a small bundle of firewood. He placed it just inside the veranda and settled beside the boy, both of them watching the rain. "Do you hear it?" the master asked. The boy tilted his head. "The rain?" The master nodded. "It falls without trying." The boy frowned, unsure if this was another riddle. But rain doesn't have to try. It's just rain. The master smiled. "And yet, you try to be what you already are." The boy felt the words land in a quiet place inside him, but his mind wanted to argue. "If I stop trying, won't I get nowhere?" The master reached out and caught a raindrop on his fingertip, holding it up. This drop did not run around searching for the ocean. And yet, where will it end up? The boy looked at the tiny bead of water, then back at the sky. The rain seemed softer somehow, as if the whole world had slowed its breathing. For a long while, they sat in silence, just listening. The sound of rain on wood, on stone, on leaves, each note distinct yet part of the same song. When the clouds finally broke, it happened so quietly the boy almost missed it. A thin ray of sunlight slipped through, lighting the wet stones until they gleamed. The air warmed and the scent of the garden shifted, no longer heavy with rain, but fresh like new beginnings. The boy didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Something in his chest felt lighter, as if the endless loop of chasing and grasping had loosened by a fraction. He would come to realize later that the master's words were not telling him to give up. They were telling him to stop straining. Like the rain, he could simply fall and trust where he landed. The next time the master taught him, there would be no words at all, just a silence so deep it felt like the world had paused. It happened on a night when the temple seemed to be breathing. The cicadas had gone quiet, replaced by the soft rustle of leaves in the courtyard and the occasional creak of old wood settling. The moon hung low and round, bathing the veranda in silver. The boy had been asked to bring tea to the master's room. He slid the shoji door open with care, expecting to find the master writing or perhaps meditating. But the room was dark, save for a single candle flickering on the low table. The master sat facing the open door, his back straight, his gaze somewhere beyond the garden. The boy placed the tea tray down and bowed. "Shall I pour for you, master?" No answer. He tried again, a little louder. "Master?" Still nothing. The boy shifted uncomfortably. Maybe the old man hadn't heard him, or maybe he was deep in thought. The silence began to stretch so thick it felt like it was pressing against the boy's skin. And then he realized this was the teaching. No hand gestures, no sentences, not even a glance, just an unbroken stillness that seemed to absorb every sound in the world. The boy's own breathing felt loud. Even the candle flame seemed to lean in and listen. At first his mind scrambled for something to say, something to do. But slowly, almost reluctantly, it began to quiet. The night air flowed in through the open door, cool against his face. Somewhere beyond the walls, a night bird called once and then fell silent. The boy sat down on the tatami, mirroring the master's posture without thinking. He didn't know how much time passed, minutes, hours. But eventually, there was nothing left to fill the space between them. When the candle burned low and finally went out, the master rose, slid the shoji door shut, and walked into the deeper darkness of the room, still without a word. The boy found his way back to his own quarters by moonlight, his steps slow and deliberate. And though nothing had been said, something in him felt as if it had been spoken to. That silence lingered in him. The next day, the next week, the next month. He didn't know it yet, but soon the quiet would be broken by laughter. Loud, unstoppable, ridiculous laughter from a Zen master who found joy in everything. The laughter came first, before the boy even saw who it belonged to. He was returning from the village with a bundle of firewood when the sound spilled out from the main hall. Not a polite chuckle, not the restrained, temple-appropriate laugh he was used to hearing, but a full-bodied, belly-deep roar that shook the paper screens. Curious, he peeked inside. There, seated cross-legged on the tatami, was a visiting master from another province. Robes, loose hair, slightly wild eyes, crinkled with amusement. Around him sat a small circle of monks, including the boy's own teacher, who was grinning like a child at a festival. The visitor had just been told a question by one of the novices. "Reverend, what is the meaning of life?" Instead of giving an answer, the visiting master had burst into laughter. Not in mockery, but in pure, unfiltered delight, like someone had just reminded him of the world's greatest joke. The boy slipped into the room, quietly sitting at the back. The laughter went on for a while, rolling and fading, then rolling again, like waves. Finally, the visitor wiped a tear from his eye and said, "You really want me to explain the meaning of life?" The novice nodded, trying not to smile. The visitor leaned forward and whispered, "It's exactly like asking why water is wet." Then he laughed again, the sound filling the room like warm sunlight. Some of the monks joined in. Others just shook their heads. But the boy noticed something. His own master wasn't laughing at the answer. He was laughing with it. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed, the boy approached the visiting master. "Why did you laugh so much, sir?" The man's eyes twinkled. "Because you all keep looking for answers that are already stuck to your faces. How could I not laugh?" The boy walked away with a half smile, unsure if he understood, but feeling oddly lighter. That night he caught himself chuckling while brushing his teeth, remembering the way the man's laughter had wrapped around the room. The next days were different. Little annoyances didn't stick the same way. When the laundry line broke and all the robes fell into the mud, he laughed. When he burned his tongue on hot tea, he laughed. It wasn't forced, it just happened. One evening, while stacking firewood, he thought, maybe laughter is also Zen. Not the sarcastic kind, not the sharp, cutting kind, but the kind that blooms naturally without trying, like rain falling, like a finger pointing, like steam rising from a soup pot. The next lesson would come unexpectedly in the middle of a mundane chore, when a single instant would break the ordinary wide open. It happened while washing dishes. The boy had been assigned to the kitchen after the midday meal, standing over a basin of cloudy water, scrubbing wooden bowls smooth with a rag. The other novices were talking nearby, their voices a soft backdrop to the rhythmic swish of water. And then, without warning, everything stopped. Not in the sense that the world froze, but something inside him shifted, as if a door he didn't know existed had swung open. The sound of the water was suddenly brighter, each ripple crisp. The weight of the bowl in his hands felt perfectly balanced, as if it belonged there and nowhere else. Even the smell of the wet wood seemed whole. There was no thought of finishing the chore, no thought of hurrying, no thought at all, really just this. He didn't know how long it lasted. Maybe it was a few breaths, maybe a lifetime, packed into seconds. When it passed, he found himself standing still, hands submerged in the warm water, a soft smile on his face. Later, as they walked back to the dormitory, the older novice noticed, "You look like you just heard a good joke." The boy shook his head. "Not a joke, more like I stopped trying to understand the punchline." The older novice raised an eyebrow. but didn't press. That night, lying on his mat, the boy remembered all the lessons so far: the finger, the sentence, the rain, the silence, the laughter, and realized none of them had been about collecting explanations. They'd all been pointing here to this moment at the basin where everything simply was. He wondered if this was what the master meant when he said not to try too hard. And if so, maybe enlightenment wasn't a lightning strike at all. Maybe it was a warm dish in a basin of water when you weren't looking for it. The next day, the world would continue. As usual, chores, prayers, errands, but he would start seeing small teachings everywhere tucked into the folds of daily life, like notes hidden in a coat pocket. The first hidden lesson appeared in the garden. The boy was sweeping the gravel paths, moving the broom in slow arcs, the way the caretaker had shown him steady. Even strokes letting the bristles whisper over the stones. At first, his mind was busy with little thoughts, the errands he had, later the sound of someone chopping wood in the distance, whether the laundry had dried yet. But as the minutes passed, he began to notice other things. A sparrow hopped across the path, pausing to tilt its head toward him. A single red leaf spiraled down from the maple landing, just in front of his broom. The breeze carried the faint scent of pine and something sweet from the kitchen. Without trying, he felt his hand slow. The broom moved not to finish the task, but to feel it. He was no longer sweeping to make the garden look clean. He was sweeping because in that moment, sweeping was the whole world. When he finished, he stood for a while, leaning on the broom, watching the sunlight catch the fresh lines in the gravel. That's when the master appeared at the far end of the path. "Is the garden clean?" the master asked. The boy thought for a moment. "It's not clean. It's here." The master smiled, said nothing, and walked on. The rest of the day unfolded with similar moments. Hanging laundry became a small meditation on the way fabric moves in the wind. Carrying water from the well was about the coolness of the bucket handle in his hand. Even a sneeze during afternoon prayers seemed like a reminder that the body too has its own rhythm. By nightfall, he began to suspect something. The teachings weren't only in the formal lessons or in the master's words. They were everywhere, hidden in plain sight, woven into each breath, each step, each unnoticed detail. Still, there were days when he would fall back into his old habits, pushing too hard, thinking too much, wanting to get it right. And that's when the master would step in, sometimes with a look, sometimes with a phrase that stopped him in his tracks. The next phrase he would hear seemed almost like a scolding, but it would turn out to be a doorway into an even deeper letting go. It was during a morning meditation session, the kind where the stillness in the hall feels almost heavy. The boy sat cross-legged, spine straight, breathing in rhythm with the others. He was determined to do it right today, no wandering thoughts, no drifting attention. Every time his mind tried to stray, he yanked it back like a stubborn mule. Minutes passed. His shoulders tightened. His breath felt shallow. But still, he pressed on, convinced that effort was the way forward. And then, Just as the gong's low hum faded into silence, the master's voice cut across the hall. "You're trying too hard." The boy's eyes snapped open. Had the master been watching him the whole time? The old man's gaze was steady but kind. When you chase stillness, you stir the water. When you stir the water, you cannot see through it. The boy exhaled slowly, realizing how tense his body had become. He unclenched his hands. His shoulders softened, and something in the air shifted. The silence around him no longer felt like a wall, but like a wide open space. After the session, he approached the master. "If I don't try, won't I just drift into laziness?" The master picked up a fallen camellia blossom from the garden path. This flower did not strain to bloom, yet here it is. He placed it gently in the boy's palm. Effort is not the enemy. Straining is. For the rest of the day, the boy noticed how many things happened. Without forcing, the sun warming the stones, the breeze moving the laundry, the kettle whistling when the water was ready. That night, lying in his narrow bed, he thought about all the times he had clenched his mind into a fist trying to grab hold of understanding. Maybe it was never meant to be gripped at all. In the days that followed, he would have his first experience of dawn in the bamboo grove, a moment that felt like the earth itself was breathing with him. The invitation came without words. One pre-dawn morning, the master simply appeared outside the boy's room, holding a small lantern. He tilted his head toward the eastern path, and the boy followed. No questions, no explanation. Just the crunch of gravel under their feet as they walked. The air was cool and damp, carrying the faint smell of rain from the night before. The path led away from the main hall, through a narrow gate, and into a grove of bamboo so tall it seemed to brush the clouds. The boy had passed this way before, but never at this hour. The lantern's light caught the smooth green of the bamboo stalks, the delicate veins of leaves, the thin mist curling around their base. Every step felt softer here, as if the ground itself had agreed to quiet down for the morning. The master stopped in a small clearing where the grove opened just enough for a glimpse of the horizon. He set the lantern down, folded his hands in his sleeves, and stood still. The boy mirrored him, uncertain of what they were waiting for. Then it began. The faintest shift in light, a slow bleeding of grey into gold at the edge of the sky. A bird called once, then again, as if announcing the day's arrival. The breeze moved through the bamboo with a sound unlike anything else, a gentle layered rustle, as if the earth itself was whispering in many voices at once. The boy felt his breath sink with the swaying of the stalks. His shoulders dropped. His mind, without being told to, went quiet. There was no trying here, only being. He glanced at the master, who was watching the horizon as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. And maybe it was. But in that moment, it felt extraordinary. When the first ray of sun broke through the mist, the bamboo lit up in shades of green so vivid, they seemed almost unreal. The boy felt something inside him open wide, steady, and wordless. They stood there until the light was full, then turned back toward the temple without speaking. Later, as he carried water to the kitchen, the boy thought, if the bamboo could teach without words, maybe letting go was the only thing I ever needed to learn. The next lesson would come not from beauty but from loss. The kind of loss that strips you bare until only what's true remains. The loss was small by worldly standards, but in the boy's heart, it felt like a breaking. It began with a letter. A messenger arrived from his home village carrying news that an old friend, the one who had first encouraged him to join the temple, had died unexpectedly. There was no long illness, no farewell, just gone. The boy read the letter twice, then a third time, as if more words might appear to explain it better. But the ink stayed the same. That evening he wandered to the far edge of the temple grounds, where the pines grew close together and the air smelled of resin. He sat on a flat stone holding the letter in his hands, until the edges softened from the dampness of his grip. The master found him there. He didn't ask what was wrong. He seemed to already know. After a long silence, the boy said, I thought I'd have time to see him again, to say the things I never said. The master nodded slowly. Time is a polite illusion. It always bows, but it never stays. The boy felt his throat tighten. I don't know how to let this go. The master looked out toward the darkening sky. When the wind takes a leaf, the branch does not run after it. It simply remains. They sat together until the light faded completely. The master rose first, but the boy stayed. Alone in the growing dark, he listened to the wind moving through the trees. It didn't try to comfort him. It didn't try to take the pain away. It just moved. In the days that followed, the grief didn't vanish, but it loosened its grip. The boy found himself remembering his friend, not with a crushing weight, but with a kind of quiet warmth. One morning, while hanging laundry, he realized something. The moment he had stopped clinging to the pain was the moment the love in the memory could breathe again. Perhaps letting go was not about pushing something away. Perhaps it was simply about no longer holding it so tightly. The next time he would see the master's raised finger, it would mean something entirely different, because now he would see what was beyond it. It happened on an afternoon heavy with the smell of summer rain. The boy was sweeping the veranda when he noticed the master standing at the far end, gazing out toward the mountains. His posture was the same as always, upright, steady, yet somehow at ease. The boy approached, ready to bow, but the master turned before he could. Slowly, deliberately, he raised one finger. The boy froze. It had been months, maybe years, since he had first seen that gesture under the moonlight. Back then, it had been a puzzle. Later, a symbol passed around, like a story told too many times. Now something inside him shifted. He didn't look at the finger. His gaze moved past it, past the gesture, past the form into the open space it pointed toward. And in that space, he felt it the same quiet. He had tasted in the bamboo grove the same clarity that had slipped into him while washing dishes, the same letting go he had found after loss. The master lowered his hand, eyes soft, and for a moment it was as if the whole courtyard was holding its breath. "You see now," the master said. The boy nodded. "It's not the finger." The master's smile was barely there, but it carried a warmth that seemed to spread into the air between them. It never was. They stood together in the quiet until the rain began a gentle patter on the roof, the smell of wet earth rising around them. The boy thought about how many times he had missed this, chasing the gesture instead of what it was pointing to. He realized the finger had been there all along, in the taste of soup, in the sound of rain, in the sweep of a broom, even in his own laughter. It was never about the finger. It was about where it led. Soon the master would offer him one final teaching, a moment of stillness so complete that words would dissolve, leaving only what remained after everything else was gone. The final lesson came at dusk. The boy found the master in the inner garden, kneeling beside a small stone lantern. The evening light was soft and golden, catching the edges of the moss and the ripples on the pond. The air held that in-between feeling, the world, neither day nor night, but somewhere gently suspended. The master gestured for the boy to sit. No words, no task. Just the two of them side by side, watching as the first fireflies began to glow among the reeds. After a long while, the boy spoke. "Master, I think I understand now. The finger, the sentence, the rain, the laughter, they were all the same lesson." The master looked at him, the faintest smile touching his lips. "Then tell me, what was the lesson?" The boy hesitated. A year ago, he would have tried to answer. Months ago, he would have guessed. But now, he simply let the question rest in the air. He turned his gaze back to the pond, to the fireflies, to the way the evening breeze moved across the water without leaving a trace. The master nodded once, as if that was the answer he had been waiting for all along. They stayed like that until the lantern's light grew more vivid in the deepening dark. Somewhere beyond the walls, a night bird called. The world was quiet, but not empty. It was full, brimming with everything and nothing at the same time. When the master finally rose, he said only, "The lesson continues." The boy knew it would. Every step, every breath, every glance at the world would carry it forward beyond the temple, beyond the years, beyond even the memory of a single raised finger. And as he walked back to his quarters, the night air cool against his face, he thought about how this journey had started with a question and ended without the need for one. In the days ahead, he would hear the master speak to the students again, offering another reminder in his own calm way. Don't try too hard. And though those words would sound simple, they would carry the same depth as the finger, the silence, and the laughter. But that is a story for another night. End of script. Sweet dreams.